Today we continue on with our NHL season preview series. We're almost finished the Central Division, but today we're talking about the Minnesota Wild. We saw them shed a fair bit of players in the offseason. They're dealing with a major amount of dead money on their salary cap. How will they fare this year? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're looking at the season preview for the Minnesota Wild. They had a pretty solid year last year. Can they keep it going? The team had to make some sacrifices over the case of the offseason because of the huge amount of dead cap space they have from the buyouts that they're dealing with because of Parise and Suter, which are really kicking the high gear for the next couple of years here. So they had to make some key sacrifices, but this still has a lot of good pieces. So in case you're new to this series, we're going to recap last year, take a look at how the team did as a whole, plus some individual stats, take a look at their salary cap, how the rosters changed, prospects, the breakout or breakthrough and breakout players that could be, make a big impact on this roster, how the things line up for their roster to start the opening night, and what are the top questions facing this team going into the season. So let's start by recapping 22-23 for Minnesota. They had a solid year, 103 points, of course made the playoffs, finished with a record of 46, 25, and 11. I think they surprised a few teams and a few people last year. I think they ended up being better than a lot of people wanted to predict. I think that's fair to say. They overall had a pretty solid campaign, as the record indicates. They scored 246 goals, 23rd best. That's one area they'd probably like to improve on is offense. But goals against and special teams are both pretty good, allowing 225 goals for 6th best. That's a really solid result. Power play was respectable at 21.4, which is in the middle of the pack, 15th best, and the PK was strong at 82 for 10th best. So overall, pretty good year. Defensively speaking, power play was good. They just needed to score more 5-on-5, which would be the main area of focus here to take things up a notch this year if they can. Individually, they were led by Kirill Kaprizov with 75 points. He might have had a chance to get more. He might have been in closer to 80 plus, maybe 85 or more, but he did miss some games due to injury. That certainly played a role in his point totals, but he certainly by far the team's best player when it comes to offense. Zuccarello was next at 67. Young up-and-coming player Matt Boldy, who still hasn't hit his ceiling, but he's getting better all the time, 63 points. Eriksson Ek had 61, and a little bit of a surprise as well, Freddie Gaudreau with 38. They've made the playoffs for the past 3 seasons, but unfortunately, like many years past when they've made the playoffs, they are all first-round losses. The state of hockey's had a good hockey team for a long time. They were kind of, for a long stretch, stuck in mediocrity, where they were kind of in that mushy middle of the NHL, made the playoffs frequently, rarely won a round. Sometimes they win the first round, lose in the second. Like, they really haven't made much progress with going deep in the playoffs with their previous core, and then of course more recently after we've seen all the changes after Billy Guerin took over. It's still a good team again, but they're trying to take that level from being a good team to a great team, and it's challenging with the tough cap moves that they had to make. Right now, salary cap wise, they only have $43,000 available. They can't do much with that, but at least they're compliant and they have a little bit of availability so they can start accruing when the season starts. That would give them a 22-player roster. And like I said, they have $14.7 million in dead cap space. Not only this year, but next year too. So they had a fair bit of players that left that they couldn't retain, and they really didn't bring in a whole lot to replace them because they just didn't have the cap space. Subtractions on this team include Sam Steele, Ryan Reeves, defenseman Matt Dumba and John Klingberg, and forwards Gus Nyquist and Oscar Sundqvist. So it's been fairly substantial. A lot of depth there, especially. When it comes to replacements on the addition side, all we got coming back is Pat Maroon and Vinny Lettieri. They also have Jujhar Khaira, who originally was going to go on a PTO, but he did sign a 1-year deal. So Khaira joins that list as well. That graphic was made for this video before Khaira signed, but he's certainly an addition too. So some extra depth there, but that's really all that they have. So at the end of the day, thankfully they still have most of all their top players, but depth-wise, I think they're going to have a a weaker team this year. I think that's fair to say. As far as prospects who can have an impact this year, well, we're looking at Brock Faber. He's going to have a big impact. I think he's going to work his way up the D charts this year and slowly get more responsibility and pick up more minutes. But he had a real solid showing at the end of last year, and I think he'll be a regular and a key contributor for them, not only moving forward this year, but for the foreseeable future. He's going to be a big part of the future on the back end. And like I said, this year I expect him to be one of those guys that, I think his responsibility and minutes will pick up as the year goes. Also, it's a big year for Marco Rossi. He's had 2 straight solid campaigns in the American Hockey League, but in limited NHL action, he hasn't really shown much, but he also hasn't been given, I don't think, much of an offensive role when he's been called up. So be curious to see what Rossi does. He was a high pick. They really need him to break through here. And he and Faber will be the main 2 young players that are still kind of in that prospect category that will be impacting this team one way or another. As far as a bounce-back candidate, I'm going with Ryan Hartman. Hartman 2 years back at 65 points. Last year he dropped to 37. That was partially due to injury because he did miss 20 games with injuries. But even with the pace he was on, he still would have been down. So I think if Ryan Hartman can get back to where he was 2 years ago, that would also be a huge help for their 5-on-5 scoring, as I mentioned. So, you need more contributions from Hartman. You need a little bit more from Rossi. And then that will make an impact overall, of course. Now, as far as a breakthrough player, I'm going with Brock Faber. I think Faber stands a great chance. Like I said, he's going to break through, in my opinion. He might start off lower in the depth chart, maybe getting third pair minutes, but work his way up. And by the end of the year, they're going to have no choice but to give him more because he's going to be one of their better defenders overall, both ends of the ice. Their projected lineup right now looks like this is courtesy of dailyfaceoff.com and their previews they put forth, but they're projecting Hartman, Zuccarello, and Kaprizov as your top line, Boldy and Johansson with Eriksson Ek, Foligno and Gaudreau with Rossi on the third line, and Maroon, Dufour, and Duhaime on your fourth line. So based on what they lost, like I said, they still have a lot of good players. Most of their key core guys are there, but their depth to me is not as strong as before. But when you have guys like Rossi hopefully having his first full campaign, Faber hopefully having his first full campaign, you expect that maybe they can pick up the slack for what they're missing here, and then the depth will be as strong as before. But overall, good team. I just wonder about when it comes to your third and fourth lines, if they're going to be quite as effective. On the back end, you've got your top 6 defensemen being Middleton and Spurgeon, Brodin and Faber, and then Goligoski or Merrill with Addison. So Faber has a good chance to start in your top 4. Even if they decide to put him on the third pair, I still think he'll work his way up, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him start in the second pair. The brief amount of showing he had last year went really well. And of course, between the pipes, you have Gustafsson and Fleury. Now, what are the questions facing this franchise? In my opinion, goaltending is going to be huge for this team. It was a huge part of their team penalty kill and goals against last year. If Gustafsson can repeat what he did and show that, hey, this isn't a one-hit wonder, this was no fluke, I can be consistent with this level of play, then that is going to be phenomenal. He had a little bit of a rough start. Of course, came over from Ottawa and not traded for Cam Talbot. At that point, the Sens kind of wasn't sure what they had in Gustafsson. They had, hit or miss every year. It was inconsistencies. Now, I think it's fair to say as well that the wild blue line in front of him much better than what he had in Ottawa. Like the Ottawa blue line now is much better than it was a couple of years ago, but he's not there anymore to benefit from it. So at the end of the day, that definitely played a role in his results. But even on routine stuff, there were times when you would say, like, okay, he should have had that one. And other times he was just phenomenal. And you just didn't know what you were going to get from night to night. But last year, like I said, a little bit of a rough start, then he took off. So can he sustain that? Is going to be huge. Flower was pretty good. Can he continue that? He didn't have a good showing in a couple of playoff games. But the goaltending is going to be enormous. If Fleury has a down year, and if he plays more like he did in the playoffs, or if he shows regression because of his age, and if Gustafsson can't hold things down as a starter and keep up what he did last year, then that's going to have a major impact on this team for sure. They said they need guys like Faber and Rossi to have bigger contributions this year. They need Ryan Hartman to put up numbers like a true number one center, because in my opinion, that's what this team is missing. It has lots of great players, but their main star players are wingers like Kaprizov, Boldy, Zuccarello, So, they're all center or weak winger. Sorry, like Eriksson Ek's a great overall player, but he's not a star number one center. To me, he's a good number two. He was projecting to be a 3 there for the longest time, but he's really worked on parts of his game, especially offensively. Now he's a good number 2 center. So if they had a true legit 1C, that would make a big difference. Again, and same thing with their fourth line, and even to a degree their third. If Rossi breaks through, they'll get more offense out of the line 3, and maybe it won't be so bad. But those are my concerns for sure right there. Can the depth provide them with enough secondary scoring? And the goaltending. The goaltending has the potential to be really good. They're both goalies that have had good history. Gus had a really good year last year. Fleury's had a phenomenal career. But what are we getting this year out of the two? If they run into any kind of injuries or setbacks in their play, they just, right now, last year, they proved that the defense and the goaltending is what held them on to win more games than not, because they didn't really score at a high clip when they weren't on the power play. Even the power play was only average. So, they didn't really do anything to this roster to suggest to me that they're going to score more goals this year. The only way that happens, like I said, is if a few players bounce back like Hartman and guys like Rossi, Faber take a step. And you get good years out of guys like Spurgeon, and hopefully Zuccarello's getting older. Hopefully he can continue to play like he did. There's some risk there. Boldy's going to continue to get better. I don't think Kaprizov's hit his ceiling yet either. So it just really boils down to all that. You need a lot of things to go well. I see in the Central Division probably teams like Dallas and Colorado being ahead of them. But I think Minnesota's probably pretty solid to be. I think they should be able to be the number 3 team. And maybe between Minnesota and Winnipeg will be like your number 3-4s. That's who I'm figuring here. I think teams like Chicago, Arizona, and St. Louis even too are going to have a tougher time in that division. But we'll see. But that's where I think things are at for the Minnesota Wild. They're still kind of in that mushy middle, but because of cap space, they're kind of limited to what they can do. But I think they can be a playoff team, and I guess, like I said, their ceiling is really going to boil down to, in my opinion, key contributions for young guys really stepping up. So let me know what you think down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis. And, of course, plenty more videos to come in the season preview series as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.